is really interested in you, then they will invest. And that is why people are usually afraid of negotiating, because it will damage a relationship or they could lose the offer. But if you spend time building influence and understanding your leverage before doing so, then you will get more significant outcomes.
Awesome. Well, what does it mean practically? Does it mean that before the CTO or the tech lead receives a job offer, should they spend more time building relationship with those people who are supposed to extend the offer? Is that what you mean?
Right. So essentially during the interview process, which sometimes can be months long, sometimes even longer than that for these positions, uh, you are selling to the company. So you deserve to be sold to once an offer is received, and you want to create space between getting an offer and negotiating it, because in that space, there's a lot of information you can gather, such as what makes you stand apart amongst all the candidates in the pipeline. What do they want you to do specifically? You want to co-create the role, um, and the impact you want to have in the first year, 3 to 5, etc. And really make that explicit, because that will make sure that you're not joining with any major surprises. You also want to understand the political environment. You want to ask questions around, well, there's a lot of questions you can ask, but uh, essentially, like, instead of not just extracting information about your leverage, but also trying to extract information around how long, where the team is headed. So if you're a CTO, obviously there's a lot more visionary things that you're going to be discussing. Um, but depending on the level, there's different questions that you ask.
Hmm.
And so from there, when you're co-creating the role, then you're creating more distance between yourself and the next potential person they can hire. So you become a need to have, not a nice to have. So that's what I mean.
Awesome. And some people suggest not to be the first one to reveal the number. So what would you say? Is it better to be the one who says what the expectation is, or what do you usually suggest to your clients?
Yeah, so negotiation is essentially a game of chicken, right? Like who's going to cave first. And usually if it's in the earlier stages, you don't want to price yourself out and you don't want to lock yourself in. So it is becoming essentially illegal in about half the country, half the states in the country, to ask for previous salary history. And so, but they will get around that by asking for your expectations.
Mhm.
And they are legally obligated to only share the base salary publicly, not the equity, not the signing bonuses or any other things outside of base. So if you do feel trapped to answering that question, then you can just give a base salary and not the total comp that you'd be expecting. But usually at the earlier stages, you want to avoid that and say, I don't know enough about the role, the team, uh, culture, etc., for me to be able to securely give a number now. But if there's a match down the line, I'd be happy to discuss that. If you are at the offer stage, it's even more critical to not share any information. And essentially, you want them to name numbers first, because if you're naming numbers up front, that's going against everything that I just said before, which is you want to wait to negotiate. And if you're naming numbers, you're already starting the negotiation. So that's what we suggest.
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting insight. And based on your experience, how much of the total compensation is the fixed salary for the technology executive roles? I mean, percentage-wise, for example, if someone is, let's say, making 500K per year, out of the 500K, based on your experience, how much is the base salary and how much is the bonus?
That's a good question. I mean, it varies from company to company. I would say in tech companies, it's like maybe equity is upwards of, I mean, I've seen it go upwards of like 7, 8x the base salary. Um, so it depends. I think, for example, like let me just say an L4 number that I have at the top of my head. For Meta, they their base in the Bay Area is 176K, and the equity moved from 500 to 2.2 million a year. Uh, so, 2.2 million over 4 years. So that's essentially 370, 356, something like that per year.
Mhm.
And then it went to 776. So that's like over a 400K increase. Um, so essentially in that example, the equity was 4x what it was before, and 2.2 million divided by 176. Yeah, I
Mm.
think that equity is usually the bigger component, but it depends. That was a long-winded answer, but it depends.
Awesome, awesome. And what are some outliers based on your experience? Like, are there still some companies that only offer base salary to CTOs or CIOs or VPs?
I mean, I would say no. That would, yeah,
That would
no,
be awkward, yeah.
no, that would make no sense. I mean, honest, like, yeah, startups, there's always some equity component, even though the cash might be lower. It depends on the startup. So if they're protective of their equity, that means that they really believe in the vision and what they could what they could be doing. But I would say that yeah, there's no equity included. That is an absolute no
Mm.
for that C-level person.
Mhm. And some of the corporations, for example, what do they usually offer? Are they as generous as Meta or some of these other cool startups?
What do you mean by corporations?
I mean, companies that are established, but not the high-tech startups, like a bank, for example.
Um, no, I would say banks, they are not as competitive. Like JP Morgan Chase, as an example, is not competitive with big tech companies. Quant finance firms is a bit different, hedge funds, etc. They are all cash offers and they can be quite competitive, but it depends on the thing is the good thing about big tech companies is that your equity is at a fixed value like you get an initial equity package at signing, but that equity can go up. So I've heard people's comp double after a year, 2 years, because they are at a tech company versus just an all cash offer, which is fixed. So um, I would say equity is it's that working at a tech company is prioritized over fixed like cash based offers for most people.
Can you imagine? Now, when you say what could be the total compensation, some people may only focus on the equity, but are there some other aspects of the compensation that could be equally interesting? Like, are there some other types of bonuses that are trending these days?
I would say that uh the base is negotiable up to a certain extent, maybe 20 to 30K per year if you don't get an up level. Up levels can change the base pretty dramatically. Uh, but usually CTO is like L10. So yeah, yeah, I would say like upwards of L10. So uh the signing bonus is negotiable. I've seen it double, triple, quadruple. It just depends on the story and how are you framing what you're asking for. But I would say the most dramatic change is usually the equity when you're negotiating.
Yeah. So when you work with your clients, um, for example, the CTO or the tech lead, they come to ask you for help. Then you look at the overall compensation that they were offered and break it down to smaller segments, right? Like, hey, this is the base, this is the sign-on bonus, this is the equity, and then you work on increasing all of them, or do you prioritize
Yeah,
one of them?
usually, for certain companies, like they don't increase anything but the equity. Uh, Others they increase all of it. So we actually, unless, well, for Meta as an example, we don't ask for anything but an increase in equity because we know that they don't increase other parts. Um, but other companies, like we usually ask for more signing bonus, equity. Uh, Base is more of something we ask for. If it's not I mean, Amazon changes their bases a little bit, Microsoft changes their bases a little bit. So we do try to give a target comp and we do try to break it down, but sometimes they reallocate our ask into different segments.
Mm.
So, but we do try to make an ask everywhere for each component of the offer.
Mm. And what are some of the good arguments that you suggest people use when negotiating some of these offers? You already mentioned building relationships. That's super cool. But once the relationship is established, what's next?
So we have an exercise that we call the impact roadmap. So it's just an example of an exercise you can do, but once you're kind of demonstrating a certain level of proficiency outside of what the interview is able to capture, because interviews are flawed processes, they can't capture everything. Once you share uh, more insight into what you will be actually doing when you join, then they're more bought into you, and then you can essentially anchor higher. Especially also you're de-risking the negotiation by asking questions around the company's BATNA or the best alternative to a negotiated agreement or their second, third, fourth choices. If you're their only choice and if they are screening, they would have to go back to the screening resumes, then you're in a much better position to really push. If they have multiple options and you haven't differentiated yourself enough, then you might not want to be as aggressive. But so depending on what you gather, then that will determine the ask that you make. And how we usually do the first ask is just based on the contributions that you would make, your contribution history, so what you've done in your career up to this point, and based on talking with the team.
Mm.
So these are the three things kind of that we include into our first ask with our anchor point. If you just say, I want more money, it's so arbitrary and they will give you a slight increase. It happens almost every time. So you have to make a strong anchor. You have to prepare for the pushbacks that you will receive, which are usually we need counter offers to negotiate. And we have to think about internal equity or parity. And so
Yeah.
you want to prepare for all the things they could possibly say. But the first ask is usually, here's who I am, here's what I've done, here's what I'll do for you, and here's why I'm worth X.
Mm.
Um, and then from there, you want to frame information as if you are in active processes elsewhere. The double-edged sword of having a C-level offer is that it's not, they're not always looking for C-level executives at companies. So the likelihood of you having multiple offers at that stage may or may not be strong. So throughout the process, you want to be managing information control and what are you sharing with them at what points. If you are managing the storyline from the beginning and saying you are in multiple processes that all have started at various points, but that you've aligned timelines and you're moving forward, then that story will be consistent once you get to the negotiation stage and you're saying, look, things are looking pretty good for me. You don't want to name explicit offers, companies, or exact numbers when they ask for them if you don't have them, obviously. So this is the bluffing piece of negotiating, which is, poker term. Essentially, if you don't have a full house, or make it seem like you do, and you want to keep the cards close to the chest, and you want to get them to bet on you before do you see what I'm saying? So that's what we recommend. But each situation it's a highly nuanced and complex transaction, and each situation story is a bit different.
Hmm. Well, it sounds so exciting now when you use the analogy with poker, full house, and this sparkles some excitement in my eyes as well. How does it work when you work with clients? Are you the one negotiating in your clients or on your clients' behalf?
So no, as of now, no. As a company, we are usually the ones that are advising you throughout the process. So we're on call, on demand, and we're giving you essentially what you should be saying, when, how, so that way we're able to so that way you are learning throughout the process. So this is a critical soft skill. So at this point of your career, you're a C-level executive, you understand very clearly, hopefully, that your technical skills will never speak for themselves and you have to give them a voice, and that's a soft skill issue. So essentially we're sharing what to say, when, and how, because we do this every day and you become experts at it, right? So any skill that you develop and do every day, you become an expert. So
Mm.
unfortunately, with this skill, most people don't have the opportunity to practice it every day. We're not talking like a flea market negotiation. Even then, it's not every day. Um, Depending on your role responsibilities, it's rare when you are actively advocating for yourself, and that becomes a highly subjective experience, and then it becomes more emotional, stressful, easier to make mistakes, easier to want to cave. So we're trying to be that objective third party that can give insights and structure emails, structure conversations, give you talking points, data, etc., so that you can feel more secure and less anxious and make it less urgent.
Well, now, when you describe the process, I'm thinking this is the easiest money earned, probably, right? Because just with a few emails or potentially a few calls, so you can probably double your compensation in some ways. Um,
It's
are there any outstanding examples that you recall? Some
yeah.
people who have really doubled or tripled or quadrupled their compensation?
Yeah, so the example I gave earlier, it over doubled the compensation and all it took was one sentence. So um, the thing is that we have insider knowledge about certain companies that we know what they do when you are starting a counter and what needs to be done and said. So I won't out the company and I won't out too many details, but there is a big tech company that the story was that the person was interviewing at another big company. It was highly competitive 4 months ago. And then the recruiter didn't know anything after that. Just 4 months ago, you're interviewing with this company, and we have data to support what that company can offer. So sharing, and this is a bluff, right? Because the thing is that we didn't have an offer in hand, but it was just as simple as saying, if we were to move forward with this company, these would be the numbers. And we have numbers because we're a company who has numbers. And so bluffing itself is that is not an explicit lie, right? It's if I were to move forward with them, these would be the numbers, and we just haven't gotten to that stage yet. So, and these are data points that we've had from very recent examples from somebody who got an offer for the exact same role, just for a different team. And so that was enough to get the comp to over double.
Wow.
And so, but different companies like don't, there that is not able to be done. So it really depends on the company, but that is an example. Another example is when somebody was, and this is the importance of counteroffers. This was an L7 person who was passed up for promo at a company. And so he was still an L6, but he got L7 external offers from very competitive big tech companies. And then those were negotiated an additional like 1.5 million per year. And then when he was handing in his resignation, they said, wait, we will give you an instant promotion. We're going to add 2.4 million to your comp per year, and you can open your own office in this location where he was long distance with his partner at the time. And so and then he had a few other non-monetary things on top of it. So there's a couple stories. It's the first example is just how a story framing information can change the outcomes, and then how walking away from a win-lose can turn it into a win-win. So
Wow. Wow. Well, these are just amazing numbers, and a lot of people maybe just now, looking at all, when you say like 1/2 million or $2 million, because they are not there just yet. So, based on your experience, what it takes for someone to go from, person who earns, let's say, 150, 200 K per year to get to a level where can ask for 2.5 million euros or dollars in equity.
I think uh it it depends on the company, right, that you're interviewing with, and it depends, yes, on the location. And it's it's more of like if you don't take your time to negotiate, your increases are going to be coming in from the point that you start. So if you are at a company for 5-ish years and you didn't do the negotiation, then it's going to take time to catch up, and you essentially didn't, you might not even get there if you stay at that company. So I do recommend getting external offers. But the thing is that if you don't necessarily want to leave your current company, then you want to be managing that conversation with your manager, essentially kind of like an expectations gradient of exceeds, meets, below expectations in terms of your responsibilities. And you want to, your feedback and your measurement of success against those responsibilities. You want your manager to comment. And if you are meeting and exceeding all of the responsibilities, then you are in a position to be promoted, and you want to manage upwards, right? So if you're doing that work and you're not getting promoted, or they're not giving you a raise that's substantial, then essentially that is setting the stage for you leaving or attempting to look for external offers. And then you are bringing that back once you're negotiating those externally, you bring those back to your employer and share, hey, here's where I'm at with these other companies, because then if you're not doing that work before, then you're just coming and waving an offer in front of them, which is going to be bad for the relationship. So you want to set the stage, you want to build that narrative. And if you're not getting what you need from asking internally, then you go externally, do what you need to do, and then you bring it back. And that's how you can, that's the most way you can, that's the best way to dramatically increase your comp at your current company. But that is why people leave jobs, because they can make more money essentially. Um, so that's my recommendation.
Awesome. And I guess the hardest part is to start this discussion with the manager in the current company about the compensation and about the other alternative offer externally. So, do you have any tips on how to get into the conversation with the manager who, may not expect to talk about the salary?
I think that it is, like I said before, like when you're framing the conversation away from money and more about your expectation gradient, how are you performing against your goals, and you're managing upwards, because the thing is that your manager is busy. A lot of them don't have training to be managers. And so if you're not doing that work, you only have how many one-on-ones a week? Maybe one every 2 weeks for what, 30 minutes at most an hour. There's so many other times that your manager is not thinking about you. So if you are not documenting your work, documenting your impact, communicating it to the manager, there's so many more things I can say about that. Then the salary conversation is going to be a lot more, like, it'll be a lot more awkward,
Mm.
because what is it tied to? What is it attached to? But if you're framing it with all of the impact that you've been creating, and then saying, hey, after doing some research and after like thinking about my progress here and what would motivate me more to do my best work, it would be great if we could discuss a promotion, a raise. I was thinking something like this. Is this something that we could maybe explore, and see how the manager responds? And then from there, you'll understand if you need to do external work or not.
Awesome. And what are some common mistakes that people make when they negotiate their compensation?
It's a good question. So common mistakes are naming numbers up front and naming numbers first, caving to deadline pressure, uh, and like rushing the process in general, negotiating right away, not doing all the things that we suggest as a company to do. I'm trying to think of anything. Not having multiple options or not pursuing multiple options, and then just cold applying. So if you're just cold applying, your likelihood of having multiple interviews is less likely, because you're applying to a company. You want to apply to a person, because people have, like, companies are made up of people. And people, if you have, like, as any relationship, if you have a strong relationship with someone or a relationship, you have a stronger likelihood to get something that person is attached to, right? So you have someone into a company, that is the best way. So you want to cold message people, you want to pitch people on your background and why they would need someone like you. And that is another thing that people don't do. They just apply cold.
Hmm.
And
Yeah. Well, I can imagine lots of CTOs don't do this at all because, a lot of them are introverted. Reaching out to people on LinkedIn is not there for that. So that's a great advice. Do you have any tips on how to actually overcome this? Like, who are the ideal people to connect with? Are we talking about people in the HR department, or should they connect straight with
yeah,
engineering managers or CEOs?
yeah, I would reach out to both. So recruiters, recruiting managers, uh, like executive recruiters would be the best ones. And then, yeah, C-level members in the same company, but yeah, or yeah, engineering managers and tech leads and anyone who would be at the same level above or one level below.
And just say,
And
hey, I'm here. I'm considering working for your company. Would you like to discuss further? Like, is that what you have in mind?
it's not so much of I would like to work for you. It's like, this is an idea, or this is how I think this could go. And based on, I have been a CTO at these companies. I have these outcomes. I would like to share with you what I think could do for your company. And you want it to be concise, you want it to be readable. You have to think about a message you would read. Would you read a block of text? Probably not. You want to make it easy to read, straightforward, and you want to be high level, punchy statements for them to be hooked in and want to talk to you.
Well, this is a great advice. And before we wrap it up, do you have any final advice for people who are kind of getting ready for the change and wonder how to maximize the compensation? You obviously mentioned several tips already, but something that we haven't covered yet.
Yeah, so I think you want to think about your BATNA or your optionality, your agency, your freedom of choice from the networking phase, not at the offer stage. So if you are thinking about, so how can you get more interviews? That's what we just talked about. How can you get more offers, which is how prepared are you for these interviews? And how do you negotiate? Because at each step of the way, you're increasing your market value because you have more freedom of choice. And so you want to be prepared for your interviews. You don't want to schedule interviews for your top choices first. You want to get practice. You want to have companies divided by tiers. So your tier one, tier two, tier three companies. And then you want to divide it by size and stage, because the earlier stage of the company, the smaller it is, the faster it'll move, versus bigger company, less headcount, harder to get into, more competitive, slower. So you want to divide it by size and stage and your interest level. And then you want to understand at the very beginning how long the interview process is, how many interviews there are, and then you can space out interviews based on that. And so you can collect offers relatively around the same time. And then, so that's, yeah. And then obviously you'll negotiate well. So,
Mhm. And how many companies are we talking about? Just roughly now, you described the process, but should the potential candidate go through 10 companies or 50 or 100 or 500?
yeah, so it really is, we want to think about apples to apples companies. So companies that would compete with each other, or another way to view it is companies that they lose talent to. So who does Google care about? Meta, OpenAI, Anthropic. I'm in the AI industry, so that's why I mentioned those companies. Um, but do they care as much about Amazon? No. Why not? Because they have the data to support. If a candidate has these offers in hand, how often on average do they choose Google over said other companies? So you want to think about getting offers from competing companies. Doesn't have to be 10, 15, because then usually there's like diminishing returns past beyond 5 offers, I would say. So uh, it's more stressful too for you. So I would say 3 offers if you can, and that would be ideal.
I like how strategic this approach is. Based on what you mentioned, this is just so cool now, to talk to an expert like yourself. And maybe just last question before we wrap it up. Now you mentioned the 3 offers to consider, ideally at the same time, right? But what if one of the companies extends the offer and says, "Hey, this expires on Monday," and you are working on the other 2 companies, but it may not materialize by Monday, right? So you are essentially losing one of the offers while working on the other 2. Like, how to align all 3 at the same time to be able to choose.
So you need to ask for a deadline extension request because you have virtually no idea what it would be like to work for this company. So I don't have enough time to make a decision. This isn't enough time for me to make a decision. I have a lot of questions. I'm going to meet with the team. I'm going to meet with these people, my manager, skip level if you have one, board, depending, uh, people you be managing, uh, etc. And you have exercise discussions you want to have, and you do not have time. That is not enough time for that. You want to ask for an additional month at least. These are deals that if you are getting C-level offers, that would probably be something that never happens, i.e. like an exploding offer like that, because that would be very suspect of the company to do that. And they have already invested so much time and energy to get you to this point that why would they put that much pressure on you? And if they do, that's really a bad sign. Um, which is why a lot of these offers don't necessarily have deadlines. But if that is the case, you do have a deadline, you ask for an extension because you want to get more information, and then you expedite the other